As you already know, story is king when it comes to horror. And with the reception of the last video on the worst twists, a lot of people really want to see the best twist in indie horror. And so, here I am. You see, the great thing about indie horror is compared to its corporate contemporaries, which tend to focus more on traditional horror and gore, indie horror has a massive focus on build-up, suspense, and an overarching story, which in turn can lead to some pretty great twists. Whether that be because of having great characters, great suspense, interrupts the gameplay loop in a clever manner, or maybe it just foreshadows it so well that when you're given the reveal, you're left kicking yourself for not noticing it sooner. And so that's what we're here for today, going over some of the best plot twists from old games to new games, veteran depths or newbies, and everything found in between. Before we start though, let's go over a few rules. Just like last time, this list will not be including fan games. So no FNAF fan games, EXE games, SpongeBob horror, anything from those categories. I might consider making a separate video on them if folks want it, but until then, we'll only be considering works from original IPs. Unlike my last video, we will be including Game Jam games. In my worst twist video, I specifically chose not to include them because they don't have a lot of time to put everything together due to their deadlines, thus making it unfair to dub them the worst twist. However, I feel like if a Game Jam game can fit in a great twist despite its time crunch, they deserve to be included. And again, this is all just my opinion, as I'm sure that many angry commenters from last video could tell you. If a game you love the twist of isn't included, chances are I just haven't seen it. So if you think I missed out on your favorite twist, open my palette by commenting below. Anywho, without further ado, let's go over the 8 best twists in indie horror. Number 8. The Lady in the Well was a previous victim from Rosetta and the Well. Rosetta and the Well is an indie game where you play as a girl named Rosetta, who after a particularly stormy night, finds that a well has mysteriously appeared in their garden overnight. After hearing weird noises coming from it, you go to check it out, only to find a mermaid inside named Gality. She claims to have been inside the well for years with little contact to the outside world until we arrived and got to know us. As she talks with us, she eventually begs us to trade her our legs so that she can finally leave the well. However, things go south no matter what you do, as the well itself is a demonic entity, which may sound boring at first until you realize that Gality is dead. You see these black sections? Well, it's revealed that the black sections are sections of Galaty's body that have since deteriorated and rotted off during use, and that the entity has been forced to replace, which is why the entity is so desperate to get a new vessel. It's foreshadowed really well too, as one of the first things our character notes about the Lady in the Well is that she has the eyes of a porcelain doll, which would indicate that they look glossy and glazed over. There's multiple endings, one of which even has Rosetta becoming the next vessel of the well, and washing up in their parents' backyard, beckoning them to join her. It's just a smart freaking indie game. Great story, great build-up, and great twist. Number 7. Mary was a painting from IB. IB is a classic when it comes to RPG Maker horror. A game where you play as a girl named IB who's going to the art gallery with her parents, eventually finding herself alone in the exhibition, and eventually brought to the surreal world of the artist's paintings, with nothing but a red rose that you must protect with your life. As you traverse this world, you'll meet a few other people with roses too. Gary, who holds the blue rose, and later an odd girl named Mary who holds the yellow rose. A good while into the game, while IB and Gary are separated, Gary finds a book talking about the last painting of the artist's life, a rather lifelike painting of a girl with blonde hair and yellow roses. Even worse is that Mary doesn't seem to know either, and when they find out, they don't take it well. After this is revealed, Mary acts way weirder, terrified of being left behind, and even backs us into a corner before Gary arrives to save us, to which she fervently tries to find us, acting out in desperation and attacking us over and over in hopes of getting rid of Gary. This eventually ends us burning Mary's painting, damning her to this world forever, which is when we're allowed access to her drawing, showing just how long she's been out here and how long she's longed for the outside world, fully aware that in order to do so she'd need to switch places with them, which is what she attempted with Gary. Swap places to become a real girl. This is possible in one of the endings, of course, where we allow Mary to get the blue rose, causing her to take it apart, killing Gary and taking his place. This results in an ending where Mary becomes your sister, as each ending has the world effectively be rewritten to either add or remove the people who survived or perished there, with those still trapped becoming paintings and those that escaped becoming real people. Either way, it's an especially interesting take to show how the sentience of the painting goes beyond just animalistic desires like the Lady in Red, and how paintings can hold wants and dreams, and grow mad just as a person would. Number 6. You and the princess are two parts of an eldritch deity from Slay the Princess. Slay the Princess is an absolute god-tier game that came out October 2023, where you play as the hero who's guided by the narrator and told to slay the princess.
He said it! He said it!
As you play, you'll find dozens, if not hundreds, of alternate routes, as the princess changes depending on the hero's perception of the princess. As you go through these routes, you'll eventually find yourself encountering the Shifting Mound, who seems to see you as an equal and will ask you to find more vessels so she can see all perspectives, longing to become whole. Once you've collected each of the base vessels, you'll find yourself in front of the mirror once again, which you'll also find before each meeting with the Shifting Mound to silence all remaining voices. In the ending, though, it reflects back the narrator, who reveals he is just an echo of someone long dead whose goal was to rid the world of death through you, the Long Quiet, and that the princess is the god of change itself, death included. As fragments of the narrator break away, you gain a sudden hit of clarity and awaken, and so too does she, as a massive writhing mass. During this, she informs us that we were indeed one being split into two, and though we were created with the express purpose of destroying her, of destroying change and the ability to die, she still longs to reunite with us, to become one. And so she shows us vessel after vessel, perspective after perspective to convince you of eternity. In other words, you're the very deity of the cycle of life and death, severed into two separate eldritch beings, which is an absolutely dope-ass way of handling this game. I'm someone who's followed this game since the first demo, and honestly, I couldn't see it go any other way while still capturing the essence of this game. Number 5. The staff were merging with the animals from Seamongrel. Seamongrel is a game by Kulu, the same developer behind Hungry Llamu. In the game, you play as a couple, Kim and Theo, who are having problems on their anniversary. Deciding to go to an aquarium last minute, they find themselves trapped inside as it closes and must escape. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as leaving, as they're suddenly face to face with horrific monsters that look like the exhibits with warped human faces, wrinkly and bloody, stretched to an uncomfortable, uncanny degree. As you journey, you'll also find a handful of surviving people from before, such as staff members and other guests. However, as you go through, you may notice multiple staff members are notably absent. One that helps you is Sally, who tells you how to get out. However, when you return later in the game, you find a familiar face infused with an egg yolk jellyfish. And upon defeating it, the characters remark on where the lady went, finding the item they need on the floor where she must have dropped it. We also do get a little background on how this happened, as there's a note from a disgruntled worker that used to be a scientist and says they'll show them all, as he hates his coworkers and hates that he was so close to a breakthrough before being cut off from an unnamed project. There's also a picture found in a locker labeled genetics lab, presumably of the scientist and his mentor mentioned in that other note. There's also a character right before all this that complained of stomach issues, which could be hinting that whatever the scientist made was given via food. Although the whole scientist mutates everyone revenge trope is kind of played out, especially in modern horror, the game doesn't focus on it too heavily, focusing more on the body horror aspect where the game shines. The twist of having these not just be mutant fish that escaped and gone rogue, and having it be the people are becoming the sea life they represent is a definite twist on the trope that I feel they pulled off very well. Number 4. Bryce isn't real from Elevator Hitch. Elevator Hitch is created by Rachel Draws This, the same creator behind Dead Play. The game is a surrealist point-and-click where you play as a nameless newbie looking to interview for the company and an eccentric higher-up named Bryce who only got the job through nepotism. However, as you both enter an elevator to go see the boss, you find yourselves in a time loop. Going through was effectively a surrealist escape room with over 40 ways to die, though you're the only one who seems to remember the time loop, or at the very least the only one willing to admit there's a time loop, as Bryce seems to make odd comments that wouldn't make sense for a normal person to make, and giving hints when we die on a level too many times. As you go on, you'll find yourself going to floor 8 at some point, seeing two doppelgangers of you and Bryce have been stuck there for months who will try to take your place. However, you can offer to take their place in return for the scissors, which is a complete lie as you shut the door in their face as soon as you get them, to which Bryce suddenly begins complimenting you for being so cold-blooded and saying that you'd make a great employee. Once we begin realizing he's not real due to this, rather than doing anything to prove he he's not or being defensive. All he says is, "Do you trust me?" Which can result in us killing him, which is the only death that results in us returning to the lobby before the reset. But this isn't just a one-off ending either. At the very end of the game, we get to meet face to face with the boss. After answering all the interview questions correctly and getting hired, Bryce says this is where they get off and steps off the elevator. Note that if we step off the elevator here, we fall off and die, and yet Bryce simply goes. Much like how the boss seems to be able to walk in the endless sky despite it, which suggests further that Bryce isn't real and is merely a construct of this whole weird eldritch business, much like all the other odd things. Even more damning, in order to get to this point, you would have to have correctly completed the job application on floor 6, which puts a functional left kidney over ambition, morality, and reliability, all traits that Bryce is shown not to have. They're not ambitious, as they're just here because of nepotism, they're not moral, as we know from succeeding the stranger danger encounter, and they're not reliable through the whole game, as they refuse to do any of the hard work and pushes all the duties onto us. And once we see the boss, we're asked how it was working with them, which if we say they were great, he replies with, "Oh, that's good. It's always nice when the tools you have work the way they're supposed to," which confirms that Bryce isn't a real person at all. If you want to go even deeper into this, his name isn't even technically Bryce, as according to the developer, the coworker's name changes every time you ask him. They're random names from a top 60 douchebag name for guys list. Why would he need to lie about his name? In fact, why would he need to give us a new one each time? It's because he doesn't have one. He's a corporate stand-in. I feel like the thing that makes this twist especially work is that at no point does the game put an excessive amount of focus on it. There's no moment where the game feels the need to have the characters repeat the twist at the end to make sure you didn't miss it, which I feel is a problem a lot of twists have, where they get worried you didn't get the twist and feel the need to repeat it over and over again. What's especially good about Elevator Hitch is that even though it does have a moment where you're explicitly told he's not real, you're left doubting yourself as to whether he really is fake or if the pro tag just went crazy. Number 3. It was all real, just altered by trauma, from Fragile. Now this is a little different compared to the other games on the list, as Fragile is based in reality, being a game about the horrors of child trafficking and organ harvesting in Mongolia. Heading home from school, we are kidnapped before we can make it home, waking up in an abandoned mine turned horror show. As we go through, we find another kid as we work together to try and escape. However, at some point during the game, while going ahead, they are captured and dragged off to a medical table where we see them be harvested alive. This sets off a sudden shift in the game where we see less and less of reality, as our childlike mind turns reality into things that are easier to digest. Traffickers become these giant monsters, you get frequent flashbacks to happier times, and see visions of your now dead friend. But soon enough, you find a gun. Oh joy! Traversing through more and more trauma, like a pile of dead children, getting tied down, watching the few people we did meet die, we eventually reach the outside where we get one last QuickTime event, to shoot or not to shoot as a horrific monster comes lunging our way, in a way exactly like the Butcher does, which is a scene you're forced to have happen right before this. However, as many would learn the hard way, this monster isn't one of the people from the mines. They're our father, relieved to see us. In fact, in this very scene, you can see the moon pin that our father has been shown to have in all of the flashback scenes, which also matches the sun pin we have throughout the game. So it's not like a twist for the sake of a twist. It's built, it's foreshadowed, and it's a realistic portrayal of trauma. You don't stop and think during a situation like that. It's natural instinct. Number 2. It's spores from the snow of Basidia. So you know how I mentioned that I will be including Game Jam games this time? Well, it's specifically because of this game. The Snow of Basidia is a part of the Haunted PS1 Advent Calendar, where multiple developers each made a Christmas-themed PS1 horror game that would be unlocked every day up until the 24th of December. One of the games in this collection is The Snow of Basidia, a short game with a clear inspiration from Ocarina of Time. Through the game, you play as a traditional hero as you go about the town of Basidia, when it's been coming up through the cracks of a nearby cave system. For the first time in forever, snow has come to the small town. As you traverse, people tell you that there was a ruckus in the caves before the snow began, so naturally we went to check it out. Going through the caves, we find more and more snow being carried on the wind, and eventually, corpses with mushrooms growing out of them. Arriving at what appears to be a temple, we find the source of the snow, a massive pulsating bundle of spores, which when we touch explodes, pushing us back out of the cavern and filling the city. As we we begin to see odd colors and see vines at the edge of our vision, we slowly see the townspeople writhe in agony as the spores overtake them and they flourish into shrooms. As it turns out, the city was doomed from the start, as the wind and snow was really the spores from the cave, and we simply sped up the process, killing everyone we know and love by simply being curious. It's insanely clever because it takes advantage of our own expectation of N64 graphics against us. The particles of the time usually need a sense of suspension of disbelief. These aren't white circles, these are wind particles, these are snow falling from the sky, these are spores. It's because of how we interpret these graphics that make it to where it can be all of these things at the same time, because the game told us what they were. It's brilliant, especially when you remember that it had a tight time crunch due to it being a Game Jam game. I really do wish it got a full release and more time so it could build up even more, but other than that, it's an outstanding twist and I wish I could experience it again on a bigger scale. And lastly, for our number one pick, I'm not gonna spoil this one, from Death Palette. Alright, Death Palette. For this one, I'll be doing a play-by-play, so even if you haven't played it, you can still get a feel for the twist. You play as an artist whose friend brings you an uncompleted yet living painting that's said to be cursed. Anyone that obtains the painting in any way is brought into a pocket dimension of sorts and must do their best to appease the painting by completing her. Your friend had been one of the victims of the painting and brought it to you before dying on the spot, leaving you at her mercy. This is another one of those games where there are dozens of ways to die, whether by getting peeled, have your neck stretched, and even crushed into a small bird cage. As you go on, you follow what the painting wants each day. Apples, macaroons, a bird friend, and with each passing day, they're more and more colored in. She slowly takes a liking to us, even if she's still as short-tempered and willing to kill us at the slightest mistake. Throughout the game, we're also given messages from the last people to try and complete the painting, one of which is a researcher who gives us the most information out of all of the previous victims. Apparently, the model was seemingly wiped from history midway into the painting, as nobody seems to know who she was, though suspected that she somehow cursed the painting. This eventually leads to us reliving the memories of the original painter, who was hired to paint the daughter of a rich old man. Rumors say that the old man was never satisfied with any of the previous works, as nobody had pleased him, to the point that each made a note to the next unfortunate painter, just like we've seen in-game. In fact, the original painter went through much the same scenario as we did, just without the whole pocket dimension and risk of dying thing. We slowly learned that the old man adopted the daughter solely because she looks like his dead sister and wants someone to paint a picture of her for his mourning. However, if he gets the portrait he wants, then he'd have no more use for her, and the girl would be an orphan yet again. So she tries to make it impossible for the painters to capture her image. One day, the daughter jumped out the window while trying to stop their bird from escaping, causing her to fall, breaking her neck. However, before she could die, the old man fished her near-dead body and propped her up, demanding the artist to paint her as she's dying, still fully awake and in pure agony as her final moments were stolen from her. The painting took in the hatred of her final moments and the regret of the original artist who never finished the painting in her honor, not being the soul of the daughter trapped inside a painting, but rather a manifestation, a copy, trying to replicate how she was in the moments leading up to it with how the model treated the original artist, with the curse only being put to rest if someone could relive the same experience as the painter, yet complete the job. It's truly an outstanding game that does a phenomenal job with, well, everything in my opinion. It's very puzzlish with a fun, unique mechanic and themes in regards to what art is, death of the author, and of course it has a phenomenal twist too, which in my eyes earns its spot as the best twist in indie horror. But what are your thoughts? Do you have any games that you think deserve a spot on this list? Spread the love down below. This was Spice from CutCafe, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace!